We are continuing our Position 360 series. We've gone through quite a few positions, and we're going to continue today with tight ends. We've got Houston Burnett from Shaking the Southland joining us. Houston, thanks for being here.
Absolutely, man. Happy to be here.
So if you've seen these, you know how I like to do them. We start with a review of last year, talk about the changes, and then we kind of dive into a preview. And for folks watching this live, if you leave comments, we'll kind of take this conversation where you want, whether it's other positions of football, basketball, baseball, whatever it may be, Clemson related. But Houston, I wanted to start off. This is going to kind of be the Jake Brenningstool show, just like the tight end room is.
Yeah.
So he was good last year. He had 498 receiving yards, as third on the team. At 6'6", he's a good red zone threat. He led all Clemson pass catchers with 5 receiving touchdowns. But he was very inconsistent. Before I dive into that, maybe some of your high-level thoughts on Brenningstool last year.
Yeah, he was probably, I'd argue, the most consistent pass catcher on the team last year, given how up and down the offense was. Jake Brenningstool was the one that was making most of the catches, 850 yards. That's a pretty good bit for a tight end there. But like you said, he had his moments where he might not squeeze a ball, or I remember the fumble against Syracuse, or especially with his blocking. It's not like this thing. He's definitely a tight end prospect for the NFL for the upper level. I think that getting the little minutia things down that will take him from a good prospect to a great prospect is what we're looking for this year. And I think that starts a little bit with some of his blocking, to be frank.
Yeah, so let me give some numbers on the blocking, because that was going to be one of the big criticisms that I was also going to share. So he was we'll start with the receiving, because it sort of ties together. So he was, he finished 8th in PFF grade despite being 3rd in receiving yards in the ACC. And this was because of the blocking, as you mentioned, especially run blocking. His run blocking PFF grade, 45.4, which was 21st out of the 25 eligible ACC tight ends. So to say mediocre would be putting a little sugar on that, right? Like, it was bad. And that's why I say Jennings played a big role, because he was the guy they could trust to block. So I don't know that you could project improvement in blocking. I don't know how you guess that. But to me, that has to be like job number one. He has to get better there.
Yeah, I'd agree. And you kind of look at the bodies behind him, not to steal thunder or anything. It's kind of the opposite. Maybe not necessarily with Josh Sapp. I think Josh Sapp, we'll talk about a little further, has kind of come in of his own as a good little hybrid of he blocks well enough. He's getting more confident in pass catching. He's becoming more of a threat, and he's someone that could be reliable later on. And then you have Olsen Pat Henry, who got more reps than kind of the others on the staff, other than maybe Sage Ennis. And his deal is he might be a better blocker from what I might be able to tell, but everyone's going to remember the drops that he has when he's got, an ocean of green grass between him and the end zone. And you can't have that as a tight end as well. I know that people want to harp on both Cade and the wide receivers and the offense as a whole, but tight ends played a part in dropping some pretty key passes last year as well.
Yeah, it's a little tricky. You talk about the offensive line struggles, but it was Phil Maffa who had the biggest missed block of the season against Florida State. Talk about drops, and some of them were the tight end. So yes, the compliments and the blame, it's not as clean cut as the blocking's not good, so it's all the offensive line, or there's too many drops, it's all the receivers. It's all a little mixed up there, and you certainly hit on some of that. You talked about Josh Sapp. He had a great spring game, 60 receiving yards in the spring game. I think and we'll circle back and talk more about Brenningstool, but as we're diving into the depth a little bit, I think Josh Sapp is the clear number 2. Is that as obvious as I think it is, or is there a real competition there?
Yeah, and this is, I'm assuming that, with Christian Bentancur coming in, I'm assuming I'm pronouncing his name right. So. He's just come in, so he's going to have to gain weight. He's going to have to learn. So maybe he comes in and just kills and takes a clear number 2. But as of what stands right now, Josh Sapp seems to have come in of his own. He's worked hard. He's a big body. He seems to be really athletic, and he is a clear number 2 where if Brenning still needed a blow, or if there's a time frame where he's out of the game or something like that, we don't want that. But it's building confidence in him that he could actually be a threat, which is kind of funny when you think about his recruitment versus Brenningstool. Brenningstool was this high 4-star. Everybody was happy about it. Sapp was kind of viewed as like, nepotism. Well, why are we taking
legacy take?
And a lot of times, there's a lot of cases where when we take these players, they pan out to be pretty good. Like, he's worked his tail off to be where he's at, and I think Josh Sapp is the clear number 2 as of today.
Yeah, you reminded me of whenever you point to recruiting rankings, there's always someone that says, "But Hunter Renfrow," and I like to make the comparison to life insurance. Sometimes the old lady who eats bonbons and smokes her whole life lives to 100. It happens, but it's the exception, not the rule. And if Josh Sapp can be that exception of a lower rated guy who's a star, I'm all for it, right?
I agree.
So let's circle back. Let's talk a little bit more about Jake Brenningstool. So he finished with 498 receiving yards on the year. The single season record is actually pretty recent, 2016. Jordan Leggett at 736 with 7 touchdowns. I tend to think he has a chance to challenge it. I just don't know if the quarterback play and the offensive line play will allow it. But he just needs to be more consistent, in my view.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot at play with him being able to reach that. If Cade, I think part of this is, you think back to those 2016 teams, especially, because getting over the hump and getting to where the offense was effective in multiple facets, you had some highly rated guys come in there that may or may not, when you look back at that team, been the most productive, that at least created an issue that someone had to take a look at. And part of the reason why people like Mike Williams and Jordan Leggett were able to thrive is you had someone like Deion Kane who could just, hey, buddy, go run a straight line. And if that takes the top off the defense, somebody's going to be open. So you have Deshaun able to pick you apart by being able to go right where that spot is, and Jordan Leggett's right there. And this is a big if TJ Moore or Bryant Westco is that, I don't think people realize how big of an advantage that gives us again, because you're not just talking about numbers going up for these 2 freshmen. You might be talking about numbers going up for Jake Brenningstool, Antonio Williams, Adam Randall. If he comes in of his own, he seems to be picking up steam a little bit more as time goes on. So it's there. I just think it's getting a flow. If you can create a matchup issue with one of these freshmen and you get Cade comfortable being able to do that, absolutely he can challenge for it. It's just kind of getting that coming together.
Yeah. So one thing that really stood out to me about Brenningstool, and you kind of mentioned that he was, he was third on, it was Tyler Brown, Bo Collins, and him. So in a sense, he was one of the main guys. But it was interesting to me how inconsistent that was, because he had some great games. Miami and NC State, which coincidentally were both losses. He had 5 catches, 126 yards, and 2 touchdowns in one game, 8 catches, 93 yards in another. He also had 9 catches for 91 yards in the Gator Bowl against Kentucky. Other games like Duke, he had 1 catch for 10 yards, and then South Carolina, which they won, but no thanks to the offense, he had 1 catch for 3 yards. So I don't expect him to have 80 yards a game per se, but the total disappearing act in some games for a player who's not really much of a blocker is almost weird to me.
Yeah. Now, the 2 things about both of those games that I'll lay out as caveats. Duke was a strange game. You had 3 instances in plus territory, not just plus territory, plus 5 into the end zone, where 17 points were going to be given to you and you just couldn't score. And so you vanish. You have issues where Cade's kind of figuring out doing this new offense in the first game. You have Shipley just, ball going right into another guy's hands, basically. So it was just a strange game. And I think everybody's kind of given that one game where it's like, he didn't really have a great game. With South Carolina, I look at it as once Clemson got up by 9, it's why take a risk when we're suffocating you on defense. We could, You know, we might be able to tinker around, but they had a talented enough secondary to be able to cover, probably because they had a good secondary play and coverage against Brenningstool. So why take the risk as far as that goes? Just pound them and pound them and pound them and suffocate them to death. And that's how it played out. So those two games are kind of odd. Whereas you look at the other 10, 11 games, and he's been pretty consistent in the yardage that he gets. And when he's on, he's on. He's very, very good.
Yeah, the end of the Kentucky game is one drive, but maybe I'm being an optimist when I try to take as much as I possibly can out of that final game-winning drive. But to see the way that Bringstool and Antonio Williams were so critical on the game-winning drive, that to me is the recipe. And so to see it, at least, it took all year literally to the very, very literal last drive. But to me, that's when Clemson's offense looked like this is a legit Garrett Riley offense and go in. So I guess kind of put a wrap on tight ends, and then we can kind of take this conversation wherever folks listening live or wherever kind of we want to go. But I think the tight end room has a chance to be a major contributor for the offense. But I don't think it's a given. I really think Brenningstool needs to take a step. Maybe it seems like we disagree a little bit on the receiving consistency, but certainly on becoming a better blocker.
Yeah.
I think if he could do that, that helps the run game, which helps the pass game, which helps him get more receiving yards. It's all connected.
And if you think about this as well, as far as the other tight ends go, Josh Sapp has come into his own. So you may not have Sage Ennis out there, but Sage Ennis didn't really contribute as much as a pass catcher. I think he had one big catch against Notre Dame, and not really much more. Josh Sapp can catch. So you have another weapon out there. So if you're in a 22 package, two double tight with two wide receivers, whatever, you can sneak that out there, and he's a possibility as far as the target goes. It's a big deal if he matures. And then with Olsen Pat Henry, if he just relaxes and catches the ball, I mean, anytime that he's been open, you think back to South Carolina game, spring game, those are 20-yard, 30-yard passes because just nobody's there. And you got to be able to haul those ends, because you think about that drive. I want to say that was the one that ended with a field goal. If Clemson's able to cash that in, and now it's a 2-touchdown game versus just 9 points, kind of a different feel, and maybe that score goes up a little bit more, but you just got to be able to clean up. It's not as drastic as a lot of people think. It's just cleaning up things and being able to move forward. Now, blocking is a different animal. I agree with you there, but you also have some bigger bodies, Benton Kerr, Marcus Dixon, Olsen Pat Henry, Josh Sapp, that can do that. I think part of that is framed for Brenningstool, but you also have guys in there that I feel confident are going to be better as far as the blocking packages go.
Yeah, and you know what? Before we wrap on time, and there's a few things we didn't hit on, and I want to also address John's question here. So we skimmed over Sage Ennis. He is the guy departing, and it's kind of interesting that he transfers out to go to Florida A&M, which is an interesting fit. And then from there, he pivots and transfers again as soon as Willie Simmons, the coach, Clemson grad, coach of Florida A&M, he goes, I believe, to Duke to be an assistant. So then Sage Ennis goes to Virginia for another former Clemson player and the Clemson assistant. So a lot of interesting Clemson connections. But anyway, all that to say, he's the only guy they lose. They replace him with Christian Bettenker. And so that's a long way for me to get to John's question to say, who's the most likely second pass catcher and or blocking kind of contributor, tight end? I still think it's Josh Sapp. But if we're talking beyond that, you were talking about Dixon and Olsen Pat Henry. Maybe it's kind of like the new guy is easy to get excited for. But I'm excited about Christian Bettenker. I think it'll take a while at that position, but maybe end of the year he's a guy who could emerge. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, he's the type of guy that he's built. He's not as, and granted, hasn't stepped foot on a college field yet, so it's very hard to project just how he's going to be. But he's a very big body. 6'6", 6'7", something like that. Big guy.
6'5", 235.
6'5", 235. So I was off a little bit. Sorry, fudging.
Still, nevertheless, big guy.
Big guy. I don't think he's quite as mobile or fluid as like a Jordan Leggett would be, and he's definitely already kind of bulkier, what I would think, than what Brenningstool him coming in and ends up as a product.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's probably more akin to, say, somebody. What we're hoping is probably a better pass catching version than Davis Allen. Like, I think Davis Allen was your meat and potatoes. Like, he may not have been this dynamic Gronk like matchup issue, but he was always the one that if he's out there, he's going to catch the ball, and he's a load to bring down. You're going to have a problem dealing with that. And I think that's what made him very good as a tight end. He may not have been the greatest ever to play tight end at Clemson, but he's a daggone problem to have to deal with.
Yeah, I'm really excited about what Bettenker brings. 6'5", 235. He split out wide a lot in high school, so we'll see how ready he is to be an inline blocker. But he finished with 51 touchdowns across his high school career, which is pretty wild. So definitely excited about him. Just a question how quick he can contribute. I know tight end's a complicated position. So let's pivot here. Let's stop for a second. I want to shout out Ready Vets, who is the sponsor of this channel. If you live in the upstate and you're a pet owner, if you need immediate walk-in care and your veterinary office is closed or can't take you, just save Ready Vets in your phone. If you ever need them, they're there 7 days a week to help you out.